This week we're in North Wales, just across the border from Cheshire and on the banks of the River Dee, the broad estuary of which gradually narrows as it winds its way downstream to Chester and beyond. The first safe crossing point over the river, long before this bridge was built, was a ferry known as Queensferry. That was until 1837, when in honour of Queen Victoria's accession, it was renamed Queensferry, and the small town that grew up around it is our home for the day. And this part of Wales was also the home of the great Victorian statesman William Ewart Gladstone, 4 times Prime Minister in the second half of the 19th century. Harden Castle was his home for over 50 years, and during his administrations it became the Chequers of its day. It was an estate where Gladstone liked to spend much of his time. And this is how he liked to spend it, with this very axe here in the parkland at Harden, felling and trimming the trees. Now, whether that was the venting of political anger and frustration or a genuine concern for the quality of the landscape, we're not quite sure. What we do know, however, is that the resulting chips off the old block became much sought after Gladstone souvenirs, and it's said that the wood from those trees was used in the making of local furniture. Well, I've no doubt that some of that wealth of Gladstone memorabilia will turn up here at the Deeside Leisure Centre, where we've set up our cameras today. Among our experts, we have a formidable team. Hugo Morley-Fletcher and David Batty will be sorting through the pottery and porcelain, along with Henry Sandon. Simon Bull will be looking out for any interesting clocks and watches, and Hilary Kay covering her usual wide variety of objects from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Over on furniture today, we already know there are some good things, including John Bly and Christopher Payne, and with a broad brief to talk about really anything that takes his fancy, Paul Atterbury. Let's now join our experts with the people of Deeside.
These are fun, aren't they, for little nightlight holders or pastel burners for burning pastels in. This one is a money box, which is rather nice, and a little hole to put your money in.
Yes.
Yes. There's this,
my father used it. That's from my father.
Oh yes.
And he said they were rarer than the others because they put the money in and they had to break the pots to get them out. I don't know if it's true.
Well, I would imagine so, but that's very nice. I mean, a piece like that, Staffordshire chimney ornament, and dates going to be around about 1860, is now worth, well, £100 or more, and they're going up fast. And some of these pretty little pastel burners and nightlight holders, that's an absolute gem, isn't it? You had this one a long time.
Yes, I've had it about 40 years, and I bought it off an old lady in a shop, and she said, it'll be dear, it's antique, and I paid 3 and 6 for it.
A 3 and 6 penny
yes.
antique?
Yes.
Oh dear. Was that in Wales? Or?
Yes, it was in where I live.
Yes,
yes.
A lot of nice things found in Wales. Well, 3 and 6pence for that.
Yes.
Well, I suppose now that's very beautiful. I love the little colour of the moss put around the doorway. Scraps of clay squeezed out through a sieve and then put on to make the moss. Very, very beautiful little piece. And I suppose that's going to be worth £250, £300. So 3 and 6pence is a little price to pay.
Yeah.
Can I tell you what is my absolute favourite amongst it?
No.
It's the clock. Do you like the clock?
I'm very, very fond of it.
I think it's beautiful. The colours we call Prattware. This lovely little ochre colour and this blue and the green. Yeah. And it possibly comes from Yorkshire.
Yes, Stockport that was from.
From where?
It came from, my family came from, his family came from Stockport.
That's Lancashire,
yes,
across the Pennine.
Yes.
It could well have travelled over the Pennine. I think this is a very typical Yorkshire piece of pottery. And I don't know how much you think it's worth.
Oh, I've no idea.
No idea?
Yeah.
Would you be surprised if I told you it was worth something like about £700 to £900?
Good gracious, no.
£700 to £900.
It'll go back in the glass case.
Put it in the glass case.
How much did you say?
£700 to £900. Say about 900.
Good gracious.
So look after it.
The lady in the photograph is my mother. She was born in 1887, and she did this sort of work in her spare time.
Well, this sort of work is really a wonderful range of decorative furniture. The technique she used is, I think, called penwork. She drew a pattern onto the surface of the piece of furniture and then would wash in colour and then varnish over the top to create a decorative finish on the piece of furniture. Is that as you understand it?
My mother called it marquetry, but I do know marquetry is inlaid wood.
Exactly.
Yes.
The aim of this was to imitate marquetry. And the interest to me in all these pieces is because we see all the attitudes of the late 19th century coming out. Here is William Morris, an Art Nouveau.
I see.
The shape of the piece is Middle Eastern. Moorish art was very popular at the time. If we look at other pieces, for example, the box here, which is a very
sewing box.
It's a sewing box. It's a very Liberty shape. It's a sort of shape of Art Nouveau furniture one would associate with a shop like Liberty, and she has improved it very much by the addition of, in this case, the grapes and the vines, drawn with enormous skill. Now, one of the curiosities, of course, is that painting furniture has become fashionable again. People once again are decorating furniture and improving it in this way. So we see these cycles of taste going on. Well, it's a bit like a treasure trove. I think I'll just delve in and see what we get.
This is a piece of hard paste porcelain from Sèvres, and if you look at the bottom there, that KK tells you it was made in 1788. And this is a very rare ground colour, and this neoclassical decoration is very much of that period. And we have the painter's mark. I think she's Mademoiselle Binet who painted that. It's a pity about this being broken, because otherwise that would be worth well into four figures, I mean 1,200–1,500 pounds. In this condition, only maybe 200 or 300. And this is a pattern that was made at over 40 factories during the 18th century. I've got a friend who's got 40 pieces from 40 different factories of this pattern. But this is the granddaddy of them all, because this is a Meissen piece made around 1735.
That makes it early then.
It's early. This is an early Meissen handle of the date. And they went on making this pattern. They still make it today at Copenhagen. But lots of these factories made. This was a day-to-day, everyday blue and white wear. And this is a coffee or chocolate cup of the 1730s. Without a saucer, again, worth between 100 and 200 pounds. I congratulate you, though, on having found such amusing and representative bits, but they're not going to pay for a...
Would it pay the gas bill? To get more treasure, I mean, here, for example, a clock case. Now, she'll have bought a standard clock, she'll have painted it and decorated it, and here we have a slightly sort of neoclassical design.
Yes.
And what I think is interesting is, as we look at all the work, every piece shows a different design. She obviously, you say she didn't go to art school, but she must have been looking at design manuals and handbooks.
I know she didn't go to an art school. She stayed at home to look after her parents.
But she must have got the designs from somewhere. And at the time, there were magazines, there were manuals on how to do this sort of work.
Yes.
And I'm sure, because she used so many styles, we've had Art Nouveau, we've had neoclassical, we've had William Morris, all these things coming together.
Yes, I see them.
And were you fond of them particularly?
Yes, I love them.
And there were many more?
Particularly another one in there that's
Which
a
was
round
that?
pot.
Oh yes, the big round pot. This one?
Yes, my mother made that for my father when they were courting.
Was this a tobacco jar?
I don't know, she just had it as a pot, on the top of the piano.
We've got holly leaves and berries.
Yes.
Was it a Christmas present?
And it was just a present as far as I know, and she made it for my father.
I think it's a remarkable and astonishing collection, because it tells us absolutely everything we need to know about how ladies spent their time in that period.
Yes.
It's an astonishing statement about the tastes and attitudes of that day.
Yes.
All these styles coming together in one person's work. I mean, a single piece in a shop, one would think, oh, that's quite interesting. It might be 20, 30, 50 pounds. A piece of furniture would be 100, 200 pounds. Every piece has a value. But I think in this case, while one might say, all right, together, the whole lot might fetch 2,000, 3,000, something like that. The importance to me is much more that it's a family
thing,
connection.
Yes.
And a reflection, I think, of a very remarkable lady.
Yes,
I'm very pleased to have met her through you.
Yes, thank you very much.
I see a Dunlop advertising figure normally, say, once or twice a year, and they're normally in pretty bad condition. But to see two in such fantastic condition is a real bonus.
Well, they belong to my father-in-law, actually. He was a golf professional at Harden Golf Club in the 40s, from the 40s to the early 50s. And I think he persuaded the Dunlop rep to part with a couple.
So that was in the 1940s?
Late 40s, yes.
Right. Because these two figures, used by Dunlop to advertise their new rubber cord golf ball, were in the professional shops promoting the product from about the 1920s to the 1930s. Yes. So by the time your father-in-law got hold of them, they would have been quite old-fashioned. So yes. He must have really liked them.
Yes, he did. He liked the faces on them.
But you'll be very pleased to hear that a figure such as this, just on its own, not for the pair, but just one, in this condition, is likely worth between, say, £400 to £600. So if you've got a pair of them, you're talking about £1,000, maybe £1,200 for a pair of simple, mass-produced advertising figures.
Good heavens. We've had them in the attic for 5 years.
Well, that's probably why they've survived in such good condition.
You're a weapons man, aren't you?
Yes.
Do you want to see a Japanese shillelagh?
Oh, God love you, sir.
Look on that side, it's a shillelagh. Look at what's happening inside. Magnificent. You've got a snake chasing two monkeys up through a grotto. There's one's got to the top. It's terrific. I've never seen one before. Absolutely stunning.
But there's got a concealed blade in it as well.
I haven't looked for one. I'd be very surprised.
We do well for big knobbly sticks on the road, so don't we? Yes, that's lovely, isn't it?
What's it worth? Somewhere in the region of, I should think, £500 to £800, something like that.
Yeah, must terrific. Just for the workmanship in it. Do you know what this is? Japanese documono. Very good. Do you know what argamono is? Small statue, small object, handle, things put on the shelf. Absolutely right. As opposed to a netsuke, yeah. A netsuke was the thing you hang from your belt, and these ocumonos sort of grew out of that idea. This one is actually a particularly nice one. It's very well carved toed. His eyes are nicely inlaid. I think this is probably supposed to be a ridge tile from a house, and this apparent break is, of course, part of it. I mean, it was carved in. It's by Masanow, who was one of the better carvers. But there were an awful lot of Masanows. There was Masanow the first, Masanow the second, Masanow the third, Masanow the fourth, and so on. And I don't know which one it is, but one could find that out. He dates probably from the first half of the 19th century. And it's an exceptionally nice carving. My guess is that it would probably make somewhere in the region from 1,200 to £1,500, and it could even be more than that. What do you pay for it? £2, because it was broken. Man. Oh no. Well done.
Isn't that lovely? Gosh, what an exciting thing. Is this a family one?
Yes, it was my father's.
Your father's. How lovely. I don't suppose there's any chance it's a model of his house.
No.
That would be too good to be true. Do you know these architectural models now are very, very sought after, very collectible. And I suppose that today is worth somewhere in the region of £3,000.
Oh.
Yeah. Is it wonderful?
There we are. Pleasure.
This is one of the nicest industrial clocks that I've seen, and I suppose I'm a little surprised to see it in Queensferry. Where did you actually get it from? Is it a family piece, or...?
It's a family piece, and there's an interesting history in as much that it came almost by lottery into the family.
Oh, in what way?
My grandmother went in to buy her engagement ring, and she happened to be the 1,000th or 10,000th customer, and she was given the choice of anything in the shop itself. And when she chose this clock, they tried to talk her out of it.
It was obviously the most expensive thing in the shop, was it? Or?
we think so, and her strong belief is that only 3 of these were ever made, but I've never been able to track that down, which is one of the reasons why I came along this morning.
As far as it being the only one of three, I can't comment on that. What I can say is that the quality of this particular piece is much better and much more complicated than any of the other clocks that I've seen. Are any of the parts on this particular clock moving?
The whole thing is demountable. These move. They can be unscrewed, presumably for cleaning if necessary.
So that's nice. They're port and starboard lamps, and they're gimbal mounted, so that
That's right.
as they would have been on a real ship.
Proper, yeah.
What I'd like to see is what's inside, and I'm just going to turn it round, because usually the excitement is on the outside rather than the inside, but I'll see whether it's true to its form here. Oh, that's nice. That actually, there's a pendulum in there which rocks. That's
the hands
wonderful.
one, yes, is all part of the pendulum movement.
It's got this wonderful patina of age built up over the years. If you look at the steps and on the little figure, both the figure at the helm and the one coiling the rope, they've got a nice sort of deep colour to them, which you wouldn't achieve if this was regularly cleaned. Well, it's a lovely story, and it's a lovely object. As far as selling is concerned, one would be talking about between perhaps £1,500 and £2,000.
I see.
Now, for insurance, you really should be talking about perhaps as much as double.
Here I think we've got a very good combination of both seascape and what seems to be a faithful representation of the ship Miles Barton.
Yes.
And I think that it is probably by Joseph Hurd, who was an artist born in Whitehaven and then worked in Liverpool in the 30s.
Yes.
Now, it belonged...
It's a family picture.
Yes, exactly.
And I acquired it when my mother died in 1959.
And do you know any of the history before that?
It's been in the family since it was painted.
Yes.
That's the 1850s.
Yes, well, there was a J. Beasley who, I've been able to find, there was a J. Beasley who owned the boat. It was
that's right.
built in New Brunswick and then actually was registered in Liverpool. Is that what you knew about it?
Yes, and then it was on the tea and Australian trades.
But where is the sea?
Well,
had you thought about that? I just wondered whether it was in the South Seas.
Yes, well, I imagine it is, but because of the icebergs.
Icebergs. Yes. But it's, of course, impossible to be accurate about it.
Yeah.
Now, one or two characteristics about Joseph Hurd's work is that the painting of the bow wave, and also that he often incorporates a steamer of some type.
Ah, yes, yes.
So I think we can be fairly certain
Sure,
of the
same as it,
attribution.
yes.
Now, the actual value of the picture, I would have thought, would probably be in the range of some £8,000 to £12,000.
Yes, I see.
Well, it's a very nice picture to have,
Yes,
and
it
also
is.
to have.
Two delightful pieces of Scandinavian furniture. Where did you get them from?
From my grandfather, or maybe my great-grandfather's home in southern Zealand in Denmark.
You actually got them from Denmark, from a family?
Yes.
Oh, right. Well, one is Danish, this one, and the
Yes.
other one is Swedish. Shall I try and explain the difference to you?
Yes, please.
The Danish furniture is influenced by the German furniture in the early to mid-18th century.
Yes.
And this tends to be more, has flat sides, it's veneered in walnut like the other one. But there are one or two important details on this which make it typically Danish. It's got 4 drawers. It's a beautifully made little piece of furniture. The drawers open nicely, oak line, so that's quite expensive. You'd expect oak and pine for a reasonably expensive piece of furniture in Denmark. Rounded tops of the drawer, nice quality. The most important feature, I think, are the feet.
Well, it's got an odd foot, I see. Do you notice
Slightly
that?
different, yes. Yes, so it's been bashed around because it's only made of gilt wood.
Yes.
Whereas it's made to look like gilt bronze.
It's very much treasured.
And what's nice about both of them is the size. They're both almost identical size, nice quality, and just perfect for a small room or house, which makes them more valuable, certainly.
Yes.
This one nearer us is, to my mind, without any doubt, Swedish. Although you say it's come from a Danish family.
Yes.
3 drawers, as I expect in a Swedish commode. This time, the shape is much more serpentine.
Yes.
Shaped sides, serpentine front, and this lovely
canted edge here, very sharp, nice knife crease edge.
Yes.
Which is quite sophisticated because that's had to be veneered. You actually had to glue the veneer on those corners. Not easy to do. But the most important thing to my mind, in terms of being Swedish, is to have these gilt bronze channels running horizontally between the three drawers. And that's absolutely typical of Swedish furniture. We're talking, in both cases, the third quarter of the 18th century. So the equivalent of late Chippendale, if you like, if you put them into English context.
That could figure.
So it figures with family history?
Yes.
Right. Yes. So what are they worth? Small, good quality 18th century commodes, both quite rare, certainly rare over here.
Yes.
Any idea of the value? I certainly think they're both, well, he's worth £4,000 to £5,000. And he, a little bit more sophisticated. Possibly there are more Swedish bars around than Danish bars, just by an edge, and this is a little bit more rarefied, probably £5,000 to £6,000 auction prices. So for insurance, they've both got to be insured for higher figures than that.
Yes.
Danish and Swedish, 18th century, and don't let anyone confuse you about that. They're real gems of furniture.
It's really
to
nice
find them here in England together is most extraordinary.
It's very hard to beat this for sheer quality. I mean, it absolutely shrieks at you of how well made it is. It's one of those late 19th, early 20th century vases that many factories in Staffordshire were capable of producing, and indeed Coalport, which is what this example is. They made for exhibition pieces and for the really top of the range. They put all their effort into getting the maximum that they could. And this one has got such a lot of complex operations on it that they probably would have lost a large chunk of their production before they got one perfect one. For a start, it's very, very thinly cast indeed in bone china. They've then pierced the border here and put it over an inner well, which is pink. And they've done the same here on the base with this honeycomb pattern. And then the body is done with these jewels of turquoise, which are just in enamel. But it looks deceptively simple. In fact, to lay that all out so that you get the whole thing fitting and you then are all over the place would take ages to do in its own right, because you're working on 3 dimensions which are moving in and out. And then all the beads are in different sizes and they taper towards the top and the bottom. So that would have taken days to produce just that bit alone. So from the very beginning it was a very expensive vase. Where did you get it? Did you inherit it or?
No, we bought it about 15 years ago.
About 15 years ago. Where from?
From an antique sale.
Well, I reckon you made a jolly good buy, because today, at auction in London, that would probably make in the region of £2,000 to £2,500. Well done, you.
I don't need to turn it round to know it's by Anton Van Woo. He's such a well-known South African sculptor.
Yes.
Johannesburg, he lived about 1860 to about 1940, a long lifespan. And this is one of his more famous models, called The Accused. But the power of the casting, not only is it technically very competent indeed, with the detail of the hair and the face, but the sheer magic of the face that he's caught in the sculpture.
Yes.
Incredibly powerful.
It is,
When you turn it round, standard signature, Anton Van Woo, Joburg, SA, South Africa. Did you buy it in Africa or?
My great-uncle brought it back from South Africa. He was there before the First War, and he brought it back with him, and it's been in the family since.
Well, that's to say he bought it as a new bronze, probably, almost certainly. Yes, I'd imagine so, yes. Because it would be cast around 1900, 1910, something like that. I think you've certainly got to insure this for £10,000, possibly even £12,000. It's such a powerful model.
It is, it's beautiful, I love it, I always have it. It's beautiful, I love it.
They carry on the date, May the 6th, 1935, Jubilee, from Lord and Lady Gladstone of Hawarden.
Yes.
Now, of course, that's a very strong local connection, isn't it?
Yes.
So, what is interesting is that the Gladstone family, who of course are still based at Hawarden, were giving out to the local school children commemorative mugs for the Jubilee of 1935, which links very nicely with the idea of Gladstone memorabilia generally.
because W.E. Gladstone, of course, the Prime Minister, who never accepted a peerage, created or inspired a vast amount of commemorative china, glass, everything else you care to think of. He was one of the most popular figures of his age. And so it's very nice to find that the image of Gladstone, the idea of Gladstone, carries on into further generations, and of course carries on today.
And it belonged to my mother's stepmother. And Mother hated it, and it was amazing that, but she wouldn't let me have it originally. But after Mother died, of course, she still had it there. And I was very afraid that it would disappear because Mother didn't like it. She said it looked like a little coffin, and I think it's absolutely beautiful.
Well, a little coffin is not really nice enough to describe it. It's actually one of the best little pieces of Sheraton furniture that you'll ever see.
Really?
Yes, this is
very exciting.
This is the finest quality mahogany, which is then decorated with satin wood, and unusually, these are the original corner inlay pieces and the original contemporary shells, both on the top and the front. And the quality, I'll put it down again, you can see, the legs taper, but they only taper from the inside. The outside line is straight. And that is a good early classic line.
That's a good sign.
And the leg comes up and the taper goes right through at an angle into this crossbar. So all of that is wonderful news, great news. Tremendous colour along here, and this depth of colour coming up and fading out where you hang. And then if we turn it round, you've got here the original carrying handle, one each side, original brasses throughout, dome
all
top.
the brasses original.
Absolutely.
That's where
Just wonderful. And that little box, made about 1785, designed by Sheraton, is probably worth today in the region of £3,500 to £4,000.
Oh, no! No! It's not.
Yes, it is. It's good.
Really wonderful. Oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I've always loved it.
An English reversed keyless fusee, up and down dial, pocket chronometer with duo and Uno hairspring, and that's the sort of description that applies to the best of English watches. It's made by Charles Frodsham, who was, along with Dent and perhaps Smith, the three best makers of watches in this country until pocket watch making died out in the early part of this century. The hallmark actually on the case is, let me see, 1911. Yes, 1911. And HMF is the case mark, which is H.M. Frodsham's own mark. I see there's a presentation on the 23rd of July 1922, so it must have perhaps been presented to somebody in your family 10 or 12 years after it was made.
That was my father-in-law's 21st birthday.
Ah, right. So it would have been bought from Frodsham. Frodsham were the company, as I said, to buy watches from. Now, it has a keyless fusee, which means that it uses the fusee, which is a mechanism in the movement to equalize the power, fusee and barrel with keyless work, which means you can wind it without using a key. And that's a very complicated mechanism to make. It has, as I said before, it has an up and down dial, which is here on the front, which is showing you the time for which the watch has been running,
yes,
seconds. And the dial itself actually has a slightly off-white colour, and the very best watches by Frodsham had dials made by a man called Willis. And I would bet you that if we took the dial off, I'm not going to, but I'll bet you the dial will be signed Willis. The case has the features, again, associated with best English work. Silver, but the nibs here, and the hinges here are in gold, And then when you're coming back to the movement, as I say, keyless fusee, pocket chronometer, which means a detonate escapement, and a duo in Uno hairspring. It's a helical hairspring, in blued steel, which has a flat hairspring at the bottom. That's all technical features, but they combine to make it perhaps the best, as I said, the best quality of English work. Beautiful. Original box. Everything, perfect. I have to put a value on it. I would think £3,000.
Really?
Not bad for a silver watch.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's a tureen of some sort. I mean, do you use it for anything?
No, no.
It's just an ornament. It's made by Coalport. And the misleading thing about the Coalport mark is it says Coalport AD 1750, and a lot of people think, oh, I've got a piece that's, you know, middle of the 18th century here, but this is the mark they used in the 1890s. Whenever you see the mark England in it, you know it's 1890s. The thing I like about this is fantastic collaboration between the potter who actually designed the bowl and the man who manufactured the foot. This is in fact silver-plated foot, and the foot was definitely designed with a view to taking that on top. It's not a later addition. I mean, often you see the pieces being married up in this way, but in fact the whole thing was designed in one go. It's a terrific piece of design, this sort of shell cornucopia culminating in the metal finial, and that's then reflected on the top part, and the whole thing is resting on a acanthus leaf base. I mean, you may or may not like it, but it's a superb piece of design.
Yeah.
It's probably worth, from a design point of view, so I would think somewhere in the region of 250, 350 pounds. So it's a very, very unusual object.
Chinese, and it's typical of the wares that were made throughout the 19th century for export to Europe, particularly to England. This one is actually, I think, probably dated about they're slightly difficult to date because they continued in the same form for quite a long period. But I think this one is probably about 1830, somewhere around there. It's what we might describe as country house condition. That is, it's had quite a lot of wear to it, particularly on the top here. That's what you would expect. But when we open up this, it's marvelously fitted with carved ivory fitments. We've got needle cases, we've got a revolving thing here for silks, we've got compartments which have got little ivory handles in the form of Buddha's finger citron. Yes, that's what that's supposed to be. Yeah. The real joy is this, which has survived because it's been kept out of the light and not been attacked by people putting things onto it. It's absolutely immaculate. Standard mirror black lacquer ground, but then decorated in 2 tones of gold, which is an added attractive feature, and little touches of red as well. We've got a scene of a river with boats, houses, masses of figures, and this boat has got a banner, and as far as I can make out, that inscription says something like the 3rd Military Commander or something like that. So, well, I don't quite know, I'm not very, my Chinese is pretty minimal, but it works absolutely marvelously. You see, the funny thing is about a piece of furniture like this is that if you broke it up, I'm not suggesting anybody would, if you broke it up, the bits, including that framed up, are probably worth more than the whole. And in this condition, it's going to be worth somewhere in the region of £2,500. So, very nice gift from your grandfather.
Yeah, very nice.
I think the first image that comes to mind, looking at this, is an illustration in a catalogue of the Great Exhibition of 1862, and also in a book called Modern Furniture, which was published about 1865, which showed a wooden version of this. Now, this is cast iron.
Yes.
And it's probably the best example of this Renaissance revival. I mean, it's got everything they imagined in the Victorian time that they had in Renaissance design. Except I don't think they had hat stands in the Renaissance period. But it is a superb example of a craft which is no longer continued to this degree of fineness. And also, it's the original colouring, the original patination. It's an oil gilding which is rubbed away and bronzed to look this lovely old colour. It looked like that when it was new. One of the most interesting things is that for such a fine one would normally expect to see the shield at the top, yes, being cast specially with the owner's initials or his coat of arms or something. And this one, left plain, may be intended to be painted, but it does indicate that it was made for intended to be sold, you know, in a shop. And that would point to one of the bigger shops in London. It is a superb example. How long have you had it?
It's been in the family for 4 generations now.
4 generations?
Yes.
Right. We count at 30 years a generation, yes, on average. So that's 120 years. So that's taking us back to 1870, isn't it?
Right.
So they bought it new.
Don't
Let's
know.
presume so.
Yes.
Let's presume so. Wouldn't have been made, certainly wouldn't have been made much before 1860. So that's good. And it's still in the same house?
Yes, still in the same place.
Marvellous.
Right at the bottom of the stairs.
Do you look at this every morning?
You sure do.
Do you like it?
No.
Well, look at it as a work of art and an example of its type.
Right.
And say it's the best ever. Let's have a look at it all over. I don't think I've seen one with a drawer. A bronze-fronted drawer. Absolutely wonderful. Well, it's a lovely, lovely thing. Goodness knows it's difficult to value, because if there is someone who's furnishing a Victorian house which would call for that, it would look magnificent, as I'm sure it does in your house. I would say £6,000 to £8,000 for insurance anyway.
Very nice.
All right?
Yes.
And thank you for letting us see it, because it's absolutely wonderful, even if you don't like it.
Well, you must be a lover of cats,
Oh,
that's
yes.
what I can say. These all yours?
Yes, oh yes.
Do you have any more?
Yes, about 300 of them.
300 cats? Luckily, they're all porcelain ones, aren't
Well,
they?
with 12 real ones.
12 real ones
yes,
as well.
Oh, yes.
My golly, what a way to go! Anyway, these are wonderfully exciting. Been collecting for a long time, I
Yes,
suppose.
about 15 years, sort of serious.
Have you really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Some of them are so hilariously funny. I mean, this chap
Yes.
with the top hat, I mean, he's just absolutely crazy, isn't he? and some of them, I mean, they go from the crazy to the very, very gorgeously, marvellously beautiful.
Yeah.
This one is very unusual. I haven't seen a single example of him ever. It's raw Worcester.
Really?
And it comes from a little group of cat kittens.
Yes.
And this is terribly, terribly rare. It's made by Worcester in about in about 1870. And Worcester haven't made many cats, but that's a gorgeous example. How long have you had him?
Oh, only about a month.
Yes.
Yes.
What did you pay for him? Can I
About £150.
So he's a pedigree cat.
Oh, yes.
You know, I think, really, well, I would imagine the price is going to be nearer £400, because he's terribly rare piece.
Oh, that's very nice.
You did jolly well.
Yes,
Then you've got other Worcester cats, haven't you, here?
Yes, the Cheshire Cat from the Alice in Wonderland.
Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
He's very like this other one here, which is modelled by Frida Doughty.
Yes.
These are Frida Doughty cats,
Yes.
aren't they? They're
That's right.
just ordinary cats, ginger cats and ordinary
of
cats.
various colours.
And they were made in the 1970s. Well, they cost around about £50 or £100, didn't they, or something like that
Yes,
each?
round about that.
Yes. But this one is very unusual, also by Frida Doughty. But he comes from the, as you say, the series of Alice in Wonderland,
Yes,
which
I
was
believe.
withdrawn. Very few of them made, and they're terribly rare. He's actually the Cheshire Cat.
Yes.
He's
that's
not just an
right.
ordinary cat, but he's the Cheshire Cat with the grin
Yes.
that never departed his face. And I suppose he's grinning because he thinks, well, I'm damn rare. And
I hope so.
He's a very rare piece. How long have you had him?
About 5 years.
5 years.
Yes,
What
yes.
did you pay? Do you remember?
About £30.
£30, did you really? Well, he's shockingly rare. And people, to make up their sets of Alice in Wonderland, there's 7 in the sets.
Yes.
And to get the set, they need Cheshire Cat. And I suppose someone wanting to make up a set is probably going to be prepared to pay £1,000 for it.
No.
So,
really?
go on collecting your blessed cats.
I knew he would have been worth more than I paid, but not that much.
You've done jolly well.
You've heard that lovely expression, make my day. That's exactly what you've done for me today. The moment I set eyes on this, I thought how charming it was. The elephant, if anything, although I'm always delighted to see elephants, rather lets it down a little bit in its modelling. It's not the best of models, the elephant itself, but the whole thing is so pleasing to the eye, and particularly all this beautiful enamel work down the front here, these lovely flowers. It's all silver, of course. But the main thing about the whole thing is these lovely Shibiyama panels that are on the top here. Each one of them, of course, entirely different. All carved from one plaque of ivory and inset with the various mother of pearl, some of them stained, some of them natural, but the whole thing is a picture. It's Japanese, not quite antique. It would date from around about the turn of the century, perhaps into the first decade of this century. So it's not quite up to the antique stage yet, but what do you know about it?
It was my grandfather's, and he bought it from a house sale in Liverpool just at the beginning of the war.
and that's really all we know about it.
I don't suppose he kept any old records on what he actually paid for it.
I think my father said he paid somewhere about £30 for it.
He wouldn't take 35 for it now, would he?
No, certainly not.
No, it's a wonderful thing, actually. I mean, even to these lovely dragons on the handles here, the whole thing rises to a domed cover with the eagle finial. Looking again further and taking out that liner, it's a little bit like, if you like, if you'll pardon the expression, a little bit kippers and curtains, in as much as you've got all this beautiful work on the outside, enamelled all round the top here, and yet when you get to the inside, I haven't bothered to finish it off. You've got all that soft saw in the bottom there, which rather lets it down. But, you know, the thing to me is these Shillelagh panels. If I said to you there's probably 10 ounces of silver in it, if that. But, you know, if this appeared on the market today, it's very, very sought after. And I could easily, and I think I may well be being conservative, in my view, that should make something around about £10,000 to £15,000. So your father, your grandfather,
my grandfather
did very well with his investment.
Oh my God, he did, yeah.
Well, sometimes, you know, I'm almost at a loss for words to describe the sort of day we've had here in Deeside today. An extraordinary collection of wonderful things, and we've met some very nice people into the bargain. Now, we began, of course, by talking about Gladstone, and I speculated that we might see some other examples of the memorabilia that surrounded him and his great career as a statesman. And sure enough, a whole collection of things have come in, not from one source, from various sources. Why was he so preeminent in this respect, Paul? Because he probably appears on more of these kind of things than any other figure apart from Victoria herself.
Well, I think there were two great figures in the 19th century, Queen Victoria and Gladstone. They were the whole history of the 19th century wrapped up together. He was 4 times Prime Minister. He called himself the people's friend. There was no figure, I think, in British political history who had had such a popularity.
Wonderful, strong face the man had,
yes,
wasn't it?
I mean, you can see here the great tree cutter, the man who was friendly in the village, and at the same time, the elder statesman par excellence.
Yes. What sort of a character was he? I mean, he looks terribly dour.
He looks dour, but there are records that he knew all the villagers, he was friendly on all sorts of levels, and he was committed to improving the lot of the working man.
Paul, thank you very much.